So welcome everyone. I'm Didier Bonnet. I'm professor of strategy and digital transformation here at IMD. Delighted to be with you for my morning, at least, depending where you are, maybe your afternoon or even late. And we're going to tackle a really interesting topic, or at least interesting for me. I hope I'll make it interesting for you, which is, the future of the digital business, and try to maybe define, what is this digital business. I will tell you right up front that I may not have the perfect answer, because it's a very complex topic, as you can imagine, but it'll be interesting to sort of look at together, what does it actually mean to be a digital business nowadays, particularly with the amazing array of technology that we are getting, virtually every 6 months. So that's what we're going to do today. Let me just share my screen very briefly. So we're going to tackle the future shape, and I emphasize on the shape because we're, as I said, we're not quite sure which way a future digital business is going to look like. But the central question really for me is that, we have been for quite a while in the middle of a fundamental shift in the competitive setting, mainly due to technology. People call it the third or the fourth industrial revolution. We call it Industry 4.0. There's loads of names around it, but all this technology is kind of fueling a different way of doing business. So and there have been companies that have been very successful at it, and the last decade at least, we've kind of answered this shift with what we call digital transformation today, right? The ability to sort of absorb all this technology into our organization and try to turn those technology into performance for our businesses, increasing productivity, efficiency, customer interactions, and so on and so forth. So digital transformation has been pretty central to the way that we've answered this kind of industry shift. And some companies have been very successful. If you think about what Nike has done, for instance, in the B2C world, or what Schneider Electric has done in the industrial world, these are companies that are in sort of, their seventh or eighth incarnation of digital transformation, making real progress in becoming a true digital business. So I guess the central question that I'd like to tackle with you today is digital transformation forever? Okay, and it's a big question. Of course, because we've been talking about digital transformation for at least a decade, probably more like 15 years now, and we're still talking about it. It's still at the forefront of most of the journals and publication that we read every day. So, but is it really forever? So I'd like to start. I'm going to ask you your own question. We're going to do a little poll, and I'm going to ask you. I'm going to give you 3 options. Is it forever? Because people talk a lot about digital transformation being a kind of a never-ending journey. So what I'd like to do is ask you, is it never-ending because market and consumer make it a never-ending journey? Is it because technology innovation, and we've seen a lot of that in the last few years, is making it a never-ending journey? So we're continuing to try to digest this new wave of technology, or do you believe that there must be an end game? So let me stop sharing for now and ask you the questions for the poll. The bulk of you are saying technology innovation is what drives really this kind of never-ending journey. Quite a few of you, 35%, saying market and consumer. And actually, many of you in the chat have said it's kind of 1 and 2, right? Because sometimes the technology changes consumers, or the way consumers use the technology changes a lot of things about how we go about doing business. And so 1 and 2 could be the answers. I didn't give you that option, but I should have. And then a few of you, 8%, say surely there must be an end game. So thank you for the 8%, because that's kind of where I am. I think, although it's very hard to define, there must be an end game somewhere. And I'm going to try to convince you and please the people who have voted, the 8% that have voted in my direction. Please help me along the journey, because I think there probably is some form of an end game to this continuous evolution in our organization. So thank you for that. Interesting. Let me share my screen again so we can go back. So let's move to the poll. Okay, so we've done the poll now. So let me think about, maybe start with, why would it be an endless journey? And the reason it's an endless journey is that if you see the picture on the left, the way we're conducting digital transformation is kind of wave of projects, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I mentioned Nike and Schneider Electric being in different incarnation because we're kind of following and making progress along the way as the technology develops. And if you think about today, we're all scratching our heads about generative AI, and this could lead to another transformation project within our organization to try to say, okay, how can we use generative AI to the benefit of our organization, be it increased personalization or chatbot in the for customer service and so on and so forth. But generally, we've seen that as a succession of projects. And I guess my question is, is there a holy grail somewhere, at least organizationally, where companies could become fully digital businesses, right? Where the notion of doing digital transformation will be less important because we will be getting used to doing these, integrating this technology as organization to drive benefit for our corporation. And remember, the only game in town is about driving performance benefit for our organization in digital transformation. So is that one way or the other? Is it going to be a continuous succession of digital transformation projects, or is there some form of end game where we can start feeling that our organization are becoming much more digital, and therefore potentially we will not use digital transformation as a term any longer? So I would contend that digital transformation is actually a transitional model of organizing, and maybe let me explain very briefly why. Because what the problem with digital transformation is, it usually cuts right across all the silos that we've built in organization, be they countries, functions, departments, whatever. So what we do in digital transformation is try to make those projects happen by putting a layer, an overlay, if you will, of infrastructure to make it work. And what I mean by that, as you can imagine, is, I'm sure some of you have a chief digital officer, right? Which is adding some accountability and responsibility to the digital transformation. Some of you have created digital units, or digital factories to try to accelerate the deployment of digital technology within your organization. That's what I call transitional model of organizing. In other words, we're trying to patch up some of the deficiencies in our organization to make those transformation work, right? That's the first thing. The second thing that's important to note is that we're kind of seeing, or at least that's my perspective, we're kind of, the single frame of reference for what happens next after digital transformation is usually technology, right? And so I've asked, many people ask me what comes next, and very often, when I ask people back and say, well, what do you think? The answer is today would be, generative AI. And then maybe in 6 months from now, it'll be quantum computing. 6 months ago, it was a metaverse, So people tend to have one single frame of reference, which is usually technology-based, to sort of figure out where organizations are going. And I guess the interesting premise for me is, can we learn something? So we've been, we're seeing technology waves happening in our economies, and we've seen that before, right? We've seen a lot of general purpose technology being developed. So I guess my question, which I'd like to tackle right now, is, can we learn anything from what we've seen going back many years around economic history to try to understand how we can evolve our organization? So let me start with the first one, which I guess you all know, although none of us were born then, but which was a steam engine. So if you remember, or if you read about what happened to organization during the steam age, corporations and factories had to put a huge single shaft in the middle of the factories because there was, one single source of power, and then try to distribute that power as efficiently as possible within the factory, which is the picture you see on the right. So central shaft and distribution through pulleys and very complex mechanical system to try to distribute that single source of power inside the factory. So that led to building factories like this, right, which are very, very tall, because you had the shaft at some point, and then you had to distribute upwards the power within the factory. And actually, for those who have been visiting the north of England, you still see some of these factories. They are not now. They're probably $500,000 flats being sold by estate agents, but those were the factories of the days. Very, very tall. And when we moved to electric motors, then what happened? So people start putting electric motors into the factories, and we didn't actually see a lot of improvement in productivity within the factory for quite a while, right? And what it took was really a new generation of managers who started rethinking what to do with electric power, right? And then, of course, we moved to the decentralization of power within the factory. We started to push these managers to start thinking about new work methods, how to reorganize the factories very, very differently. And of course, that led to what we know very well today was the principle of scientific management by Frederick Taylor. We basically try to really distribute through this new power, the work in the factory, reorganize the factory. You could see they're much longer, much lower, because they were really reorganized around workflows, material workflows, which we still use in many factory design today. So we changed. You can see what happened is that we got very little at the beginning in terms of benefits, and then suddenly, as we change the workplace, how we change how people work and how we actually design our factory at that time, then things starting to change. And you can see it in the numbers. This is just showing how electrification took some 15 years before we saw a productivity surge in the in efficiency, in terms of efficiency and productivity. So I guess my point here is that you can see the adaptation that was required to get to this productivity surge, and you can also see. I know we live in a world today where everyone is very impatient. But I hope you'll see that these are long cycles, right? That the adaptation is not an overnight sensation, that it actually takes quite a few years to get there. So let me move now quite a few decades forward and think about what happened when we invested in ICT, in information technology. And I'm sure most of you remember a now famous statement by Robert Solow, who's a Nobel Prize economist, who say you can see the computer age everywhere, but in the productivity statistics, right? Same factor again. He became known as a productivity paradox, because what Solow was saying is saying, this is all very well. We're investing all into this computing power and all this networks, LANs, WANs, and all this kind of thing, but I can't see any result. And the same thing happened again. And you can see that when you look at the statistics, this is from Chad Siverson at Chicago. He's actually showed that there was also, Solow said that in '87, so maybe a little bit too early, but he did get his Nobel Prize, so that was good. And you can see that yet again, it took quite a while, even longer this time, 16, 17 years before we can reap the benefit of electrification, right? So you can see this time lag again, where organizations have to adapt to really reap the benefit. And of course, when I saw all that, my reaction say, hey, I'm going to write a paper about I can see the benefit of AI everywhere except in the productivity statistics. But unfortunately, one of the Times journalists in the UK beat me to it, and he published that in January, and exactly the same statement. You're able to see AI everywhere except in the productivity statistics. So that bears a question: what is actually going on? Why are we not? Why does it take so long, first of all, to drive those benefits? And what do we have to learn? These are the macro level. So if we move to the micro level, what can we learn to make our organization better? And my contention would be that what we've learned over the years or at least from economic history, is that technology innovation alone does not generate productivity increase in the workplace at the micro level, right? So you have human capital and physical capital, so that we knew already, but I think we ought to consider a third form of capital, which is organizational capital. And there's been quite a lot of academic research around that to basically describe this period, say what happens during this period where we're adapting our organizations to actually drag the benefit of these technologies. And it's all about things that we know very well: decision-making, job definition, how we work as teams, how we organize, how we design our processes, and so on and so forth. So loads of factors that are elements of organizational capital that really try to adapt the organization so we can drag the full benefit of the technology. Is that clear? Thumbs up, all good? Okay, so that's what we've learned from economic history, and that leads me really to my main thesis, at least for this webinar, is I think what we're going to see coming next is much more organizational innovation than just this focus on technological progress. Now, let me make sure we understand fully. I'm not saying that technological progress is not good. It's brilliant. I'm a geek, so I love technology, but I'm just saying that we ought to focus just as much, if not more nowadays, about adapting our organization to really take advantage of these technologies. Because if we're not, we're going to do a lot of pilots. We're going to do a lot of proof of concept on technology like blockchains and AI and whatever else, and very rarely see the benefits within our organization. So that's a contention I am making. So where do we go from there? I call this particular phenomenon the augmented corporation. So this is on the way to becoming a digital business, a fully digital business, as I call it. I call this the augmented corporation. And there are really three factors that, in my mind, or there are many, but there are three main factors that drive our journey towards this augmented corporation. And the first one is automation. The second one is, of course, data science, because we know data is going to play a central part in how we reorganize our organizations. And then the last one is work orchestration. How do we actually orchestrate the way we work? So let me briefly take you through each of those, unless there are questions. Let me see. No, we're all clear right now. If there are questions, drop them into the chat box, and then I can, let me see, and then I can pick them up. I actually think it's the market. Okay. Is there a difference with this then? Okay, good questions. Yeah, I mean, the question should have been, so somebody asked, is there a difference? Is there an end between transformation, or is there an end between transformation managed centrally, which is a good questions. And some a couple of you mentioned skills. We'll come to that, because I think that is pretty central in terms of this adaptation period that I talk about, this organizational capital. A lot of that is about skills, and that's why reskilling is a central point in this. And one of you, Bogdan, you said, can we imagine complete business without people? Possibly, and I'll show you a couple of examples in a minute where we're getting close to that. It's not something that particularly excite me, because I think people still need to play a role. But yes, there are areas where a lot of the work we do today with humans can actually be replaced. So let me take each of these in turn, and keep posting your questions, because that's very useful to see where we are. So automation. So we've made a lot of progress in automation, and I'd like to tackle automation in a very broad sense. So the first layer of automation we all know very well, particularly for those of you who are in industrial settings, it's robotics, right? So we've seen huge amount of progress in robotics in two ways. One is the price decline. So if any of you are in the automotive industry, you probably remember the painting robots of 15 years ago, where hundreds of thousands of dollars, we had to put them into cages, so the safety with other workers was guaranteed, and so on and so forth. You can see how there's been a dramatic drop in the cost of these robots today. So the cost has gone down, but also the flexibility has increased, right? So I mentioned Schneider Electric earlier on. Most of the Q&A on physical parts that Schneider Electric does is done by a robot, basically switching the parts with visual recognition and then passing the parts onto the production line if it fits or not, right? So a lot of flexibility, because you can have voice recognition, you can have visual recognition, so you can talk to robots at the same time. You can have one arm, two arms, legs, no legs. So a lot of flexibility about the kind of robotics we're designing, and leading to brand new application of robotics, like humanoid robots, like social robots in the home, and so on and so forth. So loads of progress in there, both in terms of flexibility and in terms of price decrease. Now, when we see that as economists, you say, okay, the price decrease means the volume of robots are going to increase. And then the second point is the countries that are going to buy robots are the countries with the highest cost of labor, right? And that's not so true, because if you look at who's buying the bots, you can see China is right at the top with nearly a third of the robots bought worldwide. And I was surprised to see Germany, number 5, because Germany is a, an industrial bedrock, at least for us in Europe, and at the bottom. Now, there could be some union reasons for that, of course, built into those numbers, but you can see how most countries, even with a low cost of labor, are now acquiring robots, and we'll see more of that, and I think that's a good thing. But I'd like to, I said earlier on, I'd like to look at automation in a broader sense. So this is the obvious part of automation. Let's think about automation of entire customer experiences. Right. And I'm going to give you the example of, I didn't see anyone from China, but maybe there's somebody from China. This is a company in China called Leyelu Smart Hotel. So it's a hotel chain, started in 2018 with a remit to focus secondary cities in China. So not Beijing, not the big cities, but secondary cities in China, which are already big, as you can imagine, and really provide a very efficient smart hotels to target the middle travelers in China, middle ground travelers in China. Okay, so the traveling executives, salespeople, and so on and so forth. So really, price and cost was a big issue. And then 2019, as they're about to launch the first hotel, COVID happens. Right. So a second part of their strategy was to say, okay, so we have to make it cheap and cost efficient. We now have to make it touchless. Okay, so think about reinventing the complete customer experience with those kind of constraints in mind. And what Leyelu did was built a hotel which was exactly like that. So you enter, and all the check-in, all the information, customer information, is all biometric. You go to your room, there's a robot to escort you to your room. By the way, I'm not saying this is a hotel I want to stay in. I'm just giving you an example of how far this can go. So robots escort you to your room, it talks to you, you can reply back, and so on and so forth. So a lot of this advanced technology. Then you get to your room, everything is automated, right? Opening the curtain, the lights, the air conditioning, the TV is either commanded from your smartphone without any touch point, or commanded through voice recognition and voice control, right? So you can see how they've taken those constraints of cheap, efficient, automated, and touchless, and start building the hotel. And of course, when I saw this case, my first question is, how do you clean the rooms? Because do you have a robot that can clean rooms? And the answer, of course, was no. But they have designed, very much like Uber has done, a community of cleaners by city, which have on a different app, and they basically post the demands of cleaning rooms onto this app, and people just vote to take on the jobs. And it works really, really well, very efficiently. These hotels are run with 2 people. So back to your question, Bogdan, but can we run it completely without people? So this is not run without people, but 2 staff members for this kind of hotel is a step change in terms of what it takes to run hotels in terms of cost. The occupancy of this hotel is 90%. They are opening now 125 hotels like this across China. Repeat visits is 85%, and the cost is about $40 to $50 a night, depending on the room. So quite an amazing automation of not just putting a robot somewhere, but automating the entire customer experience and the entire customer journey because of the constraints that they were facing. Right. All right. Let me see if there's any questions. No. Okay. So if that makes sense, let me move to data science. So data science is probably the most obvious one, but I think what's important is to think about data science as decision making. Right. This is the only purpose of this. Okay. Since blockchains analytics, I'm just reading the questions. Is about intersection of different technology. Yeah, absolutely. So really good point, Bogdan, again, that what I've just shown you in the previous example in the hotel is not this is not just one technology. This is about weaving a number of technology together to really try to automate the entire customer experience. And it's very often some of the best applications that we see are not just focused on one technology, but how do we weave a number of technology together. If you think about Uber, the technology that Uber used when they launched was already common, right? Geolocation and so on and so forth. But what they did, which was really smart, is weave it in to create a completely different customer experience. So very good point. So I was talking about making decisions. So, you know, the analytics part is really important because the whole point of data, I'm not a great fan of big data and data lakes and all that, but I think what's important is, you know, why are we doing this? To make different decisions, better decisions, faster decisions, so on. And we're moving through a world of, you know, descriptive analytics, which we've all done for many years. You know, forecastings and, you know, describing what happened in the past and then try to do some forecasting with predictive analytics. So what might happens next, scenarios and so on and so forth. But you can see that the human input is still pretty high, right? I think we're moving to a world nowadays where, particularly through AI, where we're starting to see a lot of prescriptive analytics. So what should we do next, right? Leading to a decision and of course then to take some business action. So you can think about decision support as, for instance, a next best purchase. So Didier has bought this shirt, this trousers, and these shoes. Therefore, you know, his next purchase are likely to be these 3 items, right? That's kind of next best purchase decision support, or complete decision automation, right? So that means that a machine will not only make the decision, but take the action. So think about car insurance. So car insurance nowadays, you know, most cars, you know, in the past you had to put a sensor in your car that your insurance company was provided. Today, all the cars are completely networked, right? Because there's sensors everywhere. So they know if I brake too fast, if I accelerate too fast, or brake too hard, sorry, accelerate too fast, and so on. So they know about my driving behavior. So entirely automatically, that data can be pumped into an insurance model that basically makes a decision to say, Didier, you used to be a really bad driver, but this month you've driven better, so we'll give you a 15% discount on your premium next month. Okay, no human involvement, all done by algorithm and decision making, including right down to the action. That's kind of the world that we're moving on, right? And again, I don't want to give the impression that human beings are going to be completely taken out of the equation, because I don't believe that. But I think we will see more of these traditional, particularly routine tasks, things that we can compute being driven by this kind of predictive model, right? And of course, there's AI, right? I won't spend much time on AI, because unless you've been hibernating for a long time, you know, AI is front and back pages of every newspaper and magazine nowadays. But we're really, you know, AI is nothing new. People have been doing AI for decades. But what we're seeing today, I think, particularly with ChatGPT, is really a full democratization of what AI can do. So in other words, giving the power of AI in the hands of anybody in any corporation to start playing with the power of AI, right? We had that before a little bit with tools like Alexa or Google in your kitchen, you know, where the voice recognition type machines were operating. We had that with Siri on your mobile phone. So we had a little bit of this democratization happening, but today it's big scale, very, very large scale. And I think we'll see, and we're moving, of course, to a model where everything was rule-based, to a model where the machine themselves are actually making decisions. So a much more complex way. We're at the beginning, and I think this is an area where we do need to think. If you go back to my point about adapting our organization, we really need to think about ways of how do we adapt our organization, and particularly our people, to really be able to use this tool to drive business performance, right? We can all play with ChatGPT for hours, but it won't drive a dollar of performance improvement in our organization. So the trick is really to try to understand what are the applications where trained people can really extract the best value of these kind of tools to really improve the performance of the organization. Let me just read. Digital governance progress and so IT was breakthrough to a physical and digital world now. is weaving people and computers. Yes, absolutely. Again, good point. Very good point. So we're weaving a lot of technology. We're now weaving people and machines together. And I know there's a lot of talk. We don't have time today to discuss that. There's a lot of talk about, job destruction and job replacements. Again, I think, no one knows at this stage, unfortunately. But I think I'm still an optimist, because I heard those arguments about automation for a long time, and didn't actually happen in the numbers, at least. So I think I'm remaining an optimist. But I think the point I'm trying to make is we got to, in terms of adapting our organization and really getting to this organization innovation, we got to spend more time understanding how we can work. We can get people and machine to work together. So in other words, I put the emphasis on augmentation of the work rather than straight replacement. I hope that's clear. All right, and the last one is work orchestration. So work orchestration is, how do we organize the way we work? And we've kind of had useful concept over time, but I still see at least a lot of my clients struggling with those concepts. So you remember the lean startup, where we really learned about how can we do rapid prototyping so we can innovate faster. Then we had the agile period. Can we run agile projects? And then the question was, okay, can we move from a project to make our organization more agile, and so on and so forth. So some organizations have made huge progress, others again are struggling. Then we went into autonomy. How do we devolve more decision making to the front line of the organization? So we had holacracy, for those who remember, which was great in terms of concept, but they went as far as saying we won't have any leaders or any managers, which I don't believe for a single minute. And then Gary Hamel, I think last year, came up with this book called Humanocracy, which again reinforcing the need to push decision-making as closer to where the work is done in terms of devolving decision-making, right? And then we had redesigning work. And of course, that was really more about how do we get workers to start working very, very differently in an environment which is more and more driven by machines. Linda Grattan at LBS wrote a great book called Redesigning Work, and really using the learning of the COVID period in terms of how you organize hybrid work in the organization. So we've had quite a lot of inputs in terms of, how can we start thinking about organizational innovation, as I call it, but really not a very easy transition for most corporations. And I'd love to hear what you've done. So the question becomes, have organizations really integrated some of this learning in an effective way? And the answer is yes, some of them have. So this is the example of 7. I know we have someone from Japan, so you'll be happy that I picked 7-Eleven Japan. I think, to my knowledge, today is still the most profitable retailer worldwide. So quite an impressive organization. And you all know 7-Eleven, it's a convenience store, so not huge store, convenience store spread around cities. What they were trying to do is basically, how do we make those convenience store more contextual from a customer perspective? What that means is, how do we give more power to the local store managers, because they know what's happening locally. So for instance, there is no point having a lot of tinned fruit on the shelf if there is a baseball game in the afternoon close to your store, right? What you want is beer and burgers and ice cream and whatever else, things that people are going to demand on their way to the baseball game. So this contextualization needs really fast decision making from very, very close to where you are. So what 7-Eleven did, which is remarkable, is they basically adapted. So they're a very data-driven organization. So the flow of data is working really well. They reorganized their supply chain entirely to make 3 drops a day. Okay. Now, for those of you who are in supply chain, you'll know that to deliver 3 drops a day is a massive endeavor from a logistics perspective. And what's really massive as well is that it's not only about you and the data that you can capture, but you've got to pass that data to your suppliers and your distributors, right? They have to know that you're going to increase the demand on burgers, beers, and so on, because they have to deliver, because otherwise you have to build a huge inventory, which you don't want to do, right? So that's the really smart thing they've done. And then they've basically placed a lot of decision-making autonomy onto the store manager. So the store manager basically decides what goes on the shelf in his or her stores and get those 3 drops per day in order to adapt, right? So you can say, well, okay, this is taking a huge risk. And if we think back, a few decades, it was a real trade-off between do I remain tightly controlled centrally, therefore I control everything, but there's not a lot of autonomy at the front line, or do I go completely devolving frontline autonomy and decision making, but then my risk profile increase? That is completely disappeared with data, because if the store manager makes a hugely clever decision, you learn, and when you learn, you share with other store managers. So the whole organization learn. If one of the store manager makes a wrong decision, you coach, right? So the store manager can make a different decision next time. So really what data has done is give you visibility that allows you to keep some level of control, but with complete devolved autonomy. And these 7-Eleven Japan sells roughly on average 20 to 25% more sales than any other convenience store. So quite a remarkable story. So you can see how this flexibility has been applied on that. So let me speed up a little bit, because I want to get to the question. So now you've understood the 3: automation, data science, work orchestration. What could our organization of the future look like? So I think point number 1, I think we will have much more scientific organizations. So if we get to the point where, decision science, prescriptive decision making, we kind of crack the human machine interface, or how humans work with those machines, we will get to a much more scientific way of taking decision in an organization. Some organizations are nearly there, but not many. Okay, and again, I want to emphasize, I'm not saying that the human element is completely taken out of the equation. There will still be human judgments in the process, but we'll see much more scientific way of making decision. Second, I think we will have much more orchestrated organization. So this is the role that automation is going to take. We basically optimize, we've been spending years trying to optimize our organization. I'm sure some of you have been on lean program, where we're trying to get 0.5% to 1% improvement in the process. Machines are much better than us at doing optimization. So let the machine do the work. So we get to a tightly controlled and synchronized way of running our organization. And I know this was the promise, if for those who remember, we're old enough to remember the days of the ERP. That was kind of the promise of the ERP, didn't quite happen. But I think this time we might be closer, because there's much more, because the power of data to actually make this happen will really fundamentally could change our operating model, in my book, for the better. And then the last, but probably really the most exciting is are we going to move to organizations that are much more self-organizing, with this notion, a bit like I showed at 7-Eleven, much more fluidity in the jobs, much more decision-making at the front line, much more team autonomy, self-forming team to crack a problem, and then disbanding back into their areas of operation. So really different ways of orchestrating our organization. So more scientific, more orchestrated, and more self-organizing. So what does it take? And it's a tall order, right? So I think for me, the first thing it takes is simplification. We have built incredibly complex organization over the years. So we need to really take the cost of hierarchies that we built out of our organization as fast as we could, because that will drive shorter decision processes, shorter ways basically to communicate. I won't spend too much time on the other, because I've mentioned that, fact-based decision making, automation in most of the core front office and back office processes that you run, autonomy again like in the case of 7-Eleven. So the execution of the decision can be fast, and then this notion of being adaptive, this notion of fluidity in the workforce, so people feel comfortable organizing themselves around problems that the organization that need to crack one time and then go back into that. I would add one thing to that, which is harmonization. What digital transformation is driving at least what I've seen, is a need for some harmonization around data, processes, and so on and so forth. And the companies that I've seen the most successful are the companies that have really harmonized their processes to quite a degree. So not centralization, but harmonization of what you do. So this is a tall order. I know you're all looking at that saying, oh my God, this is like a lot of work and a lot of years to do that. And you're right. This is a study that we did a couple of years back with colleagues from the MIT, where we were looking at, okay, how many of the organizations are really getting really close to becoming a digital business. And we found out, so this is a sample of about 500 companies, we only found 7% that you could say, yes, these companies are really operating in the way that I've described to you. So no one is there yet. A lot of companies are in between. I'm sure your companies are also going through several motion of digital transformation, and that's okay. But I hope I've given you a feel for where I see kind of where the end game could be in the form of more scientific, more orchestrated, and more self-organizing is where I see those organizations going. Now, let me finish, and then we can move to question with asking you one question. Can you think of an organization which is close to being a digital business today, a traditional organization? So not Google, not Amazon, not all these born digital company, but a business that was traditionally not digital and suddenly has really moved towards being a digital business. Maybe if you have Michelin, that's a good look at. That's a good, I think Michelin is very advanced. I wouldn't say they're a digital business yet, but very advanced. And I think one of the example of a very successful series of digital transformation that they've done. And so I think it's a good guess. Good guess. L'Oréal. Yeah, L'Oréal making huge progress as well. So that's a good one. PMI. Yeah, absolutely. Who else? Honda, Haier. Yeah, very good. So these are all good examples. But let me give you an other one, because I think even L'Oréal, their company. Yes, Luca, you're remembering the teaching for Philip Morris. Yeah, the good case. But yes, Lidl, yes, probably made huge progress. But let me give you the answer that I came up with, because I was thinking about an organization that's really integrated these three notions of automation, data science, and self-organization. And the answer for me was Formula One. Now, I must confess, I was born in Monaco, so Formula One is close to my heart. And I remember when my dad was taking me to Formula One races, this was not what we see today, right? These cars were not technologically very advanced. There was no sensors on the car. We used to refuel the car with a jerry can and a funnel, and many of these cars used to set up on flames. So it was a pretty traditional, non-technology based business beyond the engine, of course, that they had inside their organization, right? So let's think about what's happened, right? Think about automation of Formula One today. Everything that in the design of the car is pretty much automated, from digital twins to about 300 to 400 sensors measuring every part of the performance of the car, right? So full load of automation put on the car, right? Think now about data science, right? Who do you think is the least aware person in a Formula One team? Any idea? On the chat box? Least aware person? No? The driver. Absolutely. Well done. Well done. Yes, absolutely. Mikey, you got it. Daniel, you got it. Yeah, Ashley, you got it. Yeah, the driver. Yeah, think about it. The driver's job is to stay on track. Drive as fast as you can and stay on track, right? And that's why you hear very often, if you listen to, for those who listen to Formula One, you hear Max Verstappen, coming on the radio, which we can all listen to in the TV program today, saying, I think I've got a puncture on the left tire. And then you have this incredibly calm voice saying, Max, no problem, keep going. Now, why is this person so calm and say the answer to that? Because They know already that 2 laps ago he hit a curb and the curb deflated the tire on the left a little bit, but it's not a puncture, it's a deficient. They all know that. They knew that way before Max Verstappen knew, right? And you have people on the track, as you can see there, but you probably have another 100 of people just outside Oxford in the United Kingdom that are measuring all this sensor data on a continuous basis. And not only that, they've already simulated a lot of the race scenarios in order to give the driver the right way, the driver and the people on the track, the right answer. So that's why sometimes on this radio you hear, Max, let's stay with P22. And P22 is their code name for a scenario that they've already planned and simulated that would allow the car to refuel at a certain time, and to change their tire at a certain time, and so on and so forth. So a huge amount of data science involved in these races. And think about work automation. Orchestration, sorry. You can see that these guys are, so that the world record for doing that today is 1.81 seconds, 1.81 second. So amazing. What's amazing to me is not so much that, you know, these guys, these are 24 people surrounding this car to try to change tires and make sure that the car spends as little as possible. Because if you spend 10 seconds in the stand changing tire, you're dead. Right? Because they have one objective, which is to win the race. Now, the question for me was, what do these 24 people do on a day job, right? Their day job normally is not to change tires. You don't have 24 people changing 4 tires. Of course, they practice before race day, but these guys are engineers, mechanics. They have plenty of other way. But on race day, they are completely focused on making sure that they can do the best job for the driver, which is to change the tire quickly. That's what I mean by, you know, self-organizing, self-forming, and this ability to have fluidity in the job market. Right. Let me stop here and take some questions. Maybe you can have a discussion. So any questions, discussion? Let me see the chat box. Yes, absolutely. So Luca, very good. Yeah. Before that technology, the only source of data was the driver. Yeah, because the driver could, and you know, he was through noise, it was sensors, right? Vibration, noise, that the driver was the only source of data. Now, probably, as I say, the driver is the least informed person because of these things. And I think what's amazing to me is, you know, let's think, okay, I've taken Formula One because it's not a normal business. We all know that they don't have the same profit motives. But if we think for a minute, you know, about our organization behaving that way, wow, right? It would be really, really impressive and really release a lot of people to do much more valuable and benefit building work in our organization. Let me see whether there's any other, we should add new performance. Yeah, absolutely. So good point, Bogdan, again, that I've not mentioned, and actually I've used Formula One, which is probably not the best example of sustainability that we have currently, although there are electric Formula One cars today. But yeah, I think, you know, an added complexity on building the organization of the future is, of course, you know, this focus and this notion of sustainability, which is why, you know, in my book, the only way to get to our sustainability and ESG goals is to use technology effectively to get to those goals faster. So that's a very, very good point. So what's the end game for F1? I think what I was saying is a good question. You know, maybe there will be no drivers anymore. You know, we'll have robots in the car, but it'd be kind of boring, right? So I think, you know, it's also, Formula One's also entertainment. So you need to keep this human aspect to it. But I think what's amazing for me in Formula One is, you know, they're already working on quantum computing and what does quantum computing means for a you know, the data side of Formula One. So it's what's amazed me is the ability to absorb this technology and having this teamwork, data science, automation, all orchestrated into the way that we deliver our products, which in this case is a Formula One car to win a race, right? So that's to me was what's the amazing thing. Let me pick some more. Massive amount of team development needed. Yeah, yes. So very good point, Jose Santiago. You massive amount of team development and people development, absolutely. And that's what I said. I don't think we're there yet, and particularly in this notion of meshing machine and people to really augment the work, we have to really think through that really, really seriously and see, and therefore, how do we reskill our workforces to be able to feel comfortable in this particular environment. So that's really, really important about where to start. So where to start? That's an interesting question as well. So Stefan, you said, lots of work, absolutely. Where do we start? I think, the simplification and the harmonization of our organizations are probably two good starting points. Because if you start automating something that's really complex, you'd have a lot of automated complexity. So I think the real simplification and what I call harmonization, which is making sure that we have harmonized processes and ways of working across our organization, is probably a good starting point on this way, as well as making sure we got the data flow sorted out and so on and so forth. Let me pick up a couple of the AI developers who compete. Yeah, I think, a lot of, so that there was a comment saying AI developers will compete in racing instead of drivers. I think even today, the power of the people that I've described, the 100 people just outside Oxford is immense. It's probably as much as a driver, because they actually drive the race strategy very often. So they have as much power as a driver, although the driver has all the risk, of course, and needs to keep the car on the track. But I think you're right, yeah. Emphasize the move from smart product to digital. Let's see, I have the same question as Stefan, especially for traditional organizers. Where to start? Okay, so lots of questions about Ashe, but where to start? How can we bring the learnings to our organization? So I think you've seen so first of all, the data, I'm sure we're all on the same track, is how do we drag this data-driven decision-making down to the lowest level, the frontline level of the organization, right? So not just data scientists who are doing great algorithm, but how do we drive these insights right down to where people are making decisions, right? That really is a trick. It's really to try to define. So therefore, it means that don't think about big data and amassing tons and tons and tons of data. Think about what is a decision that we have to make that could potentially shift the benefit curve right upwards in our organization, conversion rates and things like that, right? And then think about what data would we need to be able to make decision on that thing. And then you backtrack into your data science team or whatever to see, okay, can we actually solve that one? Right? Because you want to drive these. It's one of the biggest mistakes that people make is you have loads of clever people doing analytics on one side and nothing is being driven to the decision point. And that's a really important one. So that's kind of a good place to start, as well as what I said earlier on, which is simplifying our organization as much as we can. Yeah, so data-driven all employees. Again, it doesn't mean you have to make all your employees data scientists. But I looked at DBS, for instance, the bank in Singapore, which is a very advanced digital company. They have driven down data decision making right down to the way they run meetings. So they have trained their people, say, this is how we run meeting. We share the data, we critique the data, we analyze the data, we see whether there are other sources of data, we analyze whether there's potential bias in the data, and then we start running the meetings, right? So they are forcing their people to start thinking, and it's a mindset thing, right? It's not making your employees data scientists, it's just a mindset of using data for decision making. So that's a very good point. Let's see what I guess I will start from supply chain. Yeah, the decision at the front line is very, so good point, Jose. Again, you said the decision at the front line is very difficult for people. Yes and no. I think so. In the case of 7-Eleven, for instance, it was not a very difficult decision. When I did interview some of the store managers, and they were delighted. They said, it increased actually the attractiveness of my job, because I have something else to do, which is to think what's happening locally, operas, concerts, football games, whatever, and start planning. So it sort of revalued the job of a store manager. So they were not complaining at all. However, you're right, because, we mentioned Michelin, somebody mentioned Michelin earlier on. One of the things when we had collective decision-making in the factories at Michelin, for instance, which was a big decision. And we moved from, or they moved from individual targeting to collective targeting, so team targeting. The people that suffered the most were the middle managers. The traditional middle managers that were used to sort of devolved information, pass on information, and then do reporting, they really suffered in the process because their role was totally devalued. You know, when you have self-forming teams and team metrics, team KPIs, it's so that's something to think about. So it's a good, so it's a very good point. So what's the role of senior leadership in driving this forward? Seems like for this to take root, this has to start from the top. 100%, Mikey, I totally agree with you. I think like in digital transformation, you know, which is one of the conclusions of the research we did 10 years ago, you know, it has to start from the top. There is no point even thinking of building or evolving our organization that way unless we have very strong top-down support. It doesn't mean that bottom-up doesn't matter. That's not what I'm saying, but you do need to have people at the top with a, you know, your management team, by the way, you know, with a collective vision that this is where we're driving the business to. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, so thank you, Ron, saying DBS has cut operational costs around 40% over the last 15 years. Yeah, and I think, you know, we're not, so again, this is a good point showing, you know, what I was trying to say about lean is that once you get more and more towards a digital business, you know, the step change in operating performance can be as big as this 40%, right? Not the 1 or 2% we're trying to shave through lean programs and others. And again, I've got nothing against lean program; they're useful, but we're trying to shave and be very incremental. Whereas if we start thinking about organization that way, you can get to really big step change. Used for innovation around job to be done and human component, who better? Yes. Okay. So yeah, AI role. Yeah. So AI role is, and AI neuroscience, is that going to change fundamentally the way that we become more prescriptive? I think so. I think we'll become more prescriptive. Again, I'm not a great fan of, you know, AI is going to replace every job on the planet. I don't believe that for a single minute. It will replace some jobs. It will create others. I think what we need to put the emphasis in our organization is how do we get the power of AI helping people make better decisions in organization and therefore releasing capacity to do much more enriching tasks within the organization. And that goes through reskilling, it goes through changing the job definition, maybe giving more autonomy to the frontline people so they can organize the work the way they see fit, and so on and so forth, which is really difficult decision, and particularly, as I mentioned, for middle managers. Prepare in order to be part of digital organization in the future. Yeah, so Olga, you ask a good question. You know, how can people get prepared? I think a lot of it is the consciousness about where you're going in terms of automation, in terms of data science, in terms of changing your organization. I think a lot of it is also about experimentation. So a lot of the example I've showed you, you know, like 7-Eleven, loads of experimentation before you get to the point where you scale it up. And I think this is something that we got to get good at. There are too many organizations who have 27 proof of concept and nothing is ever scaled. So I think this notion of thinking through an experiment, testing it, if it doesn't work, you kill it. If it works, then you need to scale it. So experimentation is a good way, absolutely good way to get there. And of course, the people side, you got to reskill your people at different levels, right? There's some people need only just a notion of what these technologies can do. Other people would need to be really deeply trained, and you need to build this curriculum because pretty much everyone in your organization will need reskilling. I was reading yesterday a press statement from Wipro, the IT company in India, saying we're going to spend $1 billion over the next 3 years reskilling our entire population, which is 250,000 people, to really understand AI. You know, to really understand and use AI within the organization. So really to become AI aware. You know, these are big ticket items, but it's what we got to do if we want to reach that that kind of augmented corporation idea that I put in front of you. I see that we're running over, so I really apologize. I'm already 1 minute above. So Ricardo, should we stop here? I'll get all the questions that you've asked printed. If there are lots that have not been answered, I can send you emails with at least my thoughts on that. So thank you for all your questions. It's been a real pleasure spending some time with you. I know I've tried to cram a very complex and big project in an hour, which is not easy, but I hope it was helpful, at least to challenge the way that we're thinking about digital transformation as a continuous journey versus, hey, maybe there is a point where these organizations will have really innovated themselves to the point where digital technology will be absorbed in a much easier way than it is today. So with that, I thank you all very much. Have a great day wherever you are in all corners of the world, and I hope you've enjoyed the webinar. See you soon. Thank you very much.